right. Let me try and fix my volume real quick. Can you hear that, Melanie?
I can, yes.
Okay. All right. All right. Okay, let's get started. Hello and welcome everyone to Survivor Space for today's SurvivorCircle session. I am Stephanie Plank. I'm a program manager here at Zero Abuse Project, and I am very pleased to welcome one of our amazing Survivor Space subject matter experts, Melanie Sachs-Barton, as today's presenter. A few notes about how to participate today. This session is being live streamed on YouTube. And so if you're watching from the Survivor Space website and you'd like to enlarge the screen for Melanie's presentation, you can click on the square icon in the bottom right corner of the video. And then to participate in the chat, you can also type into the chat box that appears on the screen on the actual web page for today's session in Survivor Space. During today's session, Melanie will be sharing about her experience as a survivor. So if you want or need a break, please take care of yourself. This session is being recorded, so if you need to step away for your self-care or for your schedule, you can watch the recording at a later time. And so without further ado, I'll turn it over to Melanie for today's presentation. And thank you for joining us.
Of course. So I'm going to start by giving you a little background of my experience as a survivor, and then walking you through my journey through pelvic pain and beyond. So my story starts many years ago when I was 12 years old, and a little bit before that, which I'll get into. When I was 12 years old, I was sexually assaulted in broad daylight by a family member of my best friend at the time. The sexual assault was pretty violent physically and forceful. And, I went through a lot of deep wounds, as many survivors can relate to, with sexual assault, sexual abuse, sexual trauma. And so for many years, I kind of lived in that cycle of pain. And many years later, I had recovered some sexual abuse from repressed memories that I had from prior to my sexual assault at 12. When I was around 9 to 10 years old at a babysitter's house by her teenage sons. And so I'm not going to get into too much detail about my abuse, but wanted to set the stage with that because for the rest of this kind of Survivor Circle, I'm going to be talking about the physical ramifications and impact of trauma, which I feel like doesn't get a lot of attention and or is just really hard to talk about. And so as I came to kind of the end, healing is not linear, so there's no real end of my journey, but to the end of this part of my journey, I really wanted to shed light on this because I feel like, and I'm pretty confident that I'm not alone in walking through the physical ramifications of child sexual abuse, sexual assault, sexual trauma, and even some parts of this, even religious trauma. Your body, as we know, your body keeps score. And so, really walking you through kind of the impact of my sexual assaults on my body and what the journey looked like after the trial was said and done and after many years of healing, what I had to face to heal really fully. I do feel in a lot of ways fully healed in a lot of ways, but this was the missing piece. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. But first, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the kind of process was like for me. Again, I'm not going to talk about my I don't want to re-traumatize people by sharing the ins and outs of my abuse. But so basically, I was sexually assaulted in 2004 at the age of 12, and again before that at around 2002. And then the trial for what happened to me when I was 12 actually went forward 2 years later. There were 5 postponements. My life was on hold for those 2 years, reliving the trauma over and over again, PTSD, self-injury, restricting my eating, wanting control over something. And throughout that time, I knew deep down that something happened to my body during my assault when I was 12. I remember the moment that had happened, where the pain went from painful to excruciating. And my brain and body at 12 years old was too young to comprehend what in the world that could have been. And so I actually didn't really come to terms with that fact until many years later through my healing journey. And what happened to me prior to when I was 12 years old, at ages around 9 to 10, I think contributed to my body's internalization, the tightness, the trauma response, the pushing it down further and further, the not dealing with it. As I was healing from really the memories, the PTSD, the self-injury, going through therapy, trying to stop self-injury, and really trying to grasp onto my healing journey, this piece just kept being pushed further and further down as I started to heal, because it carried a lot of shame. And a lot of parts of our stories as survivors can carry a lot of shame, but this one felt like it was the part that had the most shame attached to it. So in 2006, when I was around 14 and 15, the trial starts and ends fairly quickly. It was around a 3-day trial. He did get convicted, but a very small conviction that did not amount to what he did to me. And so, I'll talk a little bit about that. So he was initially charged with 2 counts of aggravated felonious sexual assault, and it was actually brought down to a misdemeanor. But at the same time, I did find my voice at the Child Advocacy Center and the courtroom, and was able to share the impact at my capacity at the time. I think I would have said a lot more things now looking back, but at the time it was very short. It was very brief. I was terrified to testify. And, so that's really where kind of my journey through the system ended. I felt set free in a lot of ways when I walked out of that courtroom, and I knew I wanted something to change. I did not want to live in this cycle of darkness anymore. But I knew deep down that there was a tether to my past, that there was an intimate pain that lived deep inside my body from what happened to me. And as I talked about earlier, the body keeps score. We've all maybe heard of the book and just the term used when referring to trauma. And trauma lives inside the body, and this is the most real way that I experienced it. My pelvic area held my trauma, and I had fear of the future. I had fear of relationships, and deep-rooted lies about my body started to form. And I started to reinforce those lies mentally, just by, I'll never find love. No one will ever love me because of what's going on inside my body. Like, I knew something was very wrong. And the first way that I knew something was very wrong, that when I started to get my period, I could not use like a tampon at all. My body was rejecting it physically. I would instantly feel nausea when I tried. I would want to throw up. And I'm going to say I'm going to say now and maybe later, there are some trigger warnings in this presentation. I'm going to be very real about my experience, because I think shedding light on the darkest parts really sets you free and can set others free, obviously without getting into real gruesome detail. But I want to be as honest as possible, because I know I'm not alone. And I really wish someone had been this honest, so that I could have watched something like this to know that I wasn't alone with this, what I felt at the time was a very shameful existence inside my body. So I had friends, throughout my adolescence, even a friend that had gone through sexual assault with me the same day when I was 12. He had assaulted both of us the same day in the same way. And she would stand out. I went to visit her in Florida. I'll never forget it, one year. And she would stand outside the bathroom door, because I just wanted to feel normal. No one was telling me that I had to wear a tampon, but I wanted to feel normal like my peers, to be able to girls talk about that stuff. And I just felt so much shame surrounding it, because my body was basically revolting against me, it felt like. And I didn't understand, even with a friend who had a similar experience, like she could wear tampons, no problem. And I just felt it isolated me from feeling that my body caught up with my healing journey, that my body caught up with my peers. I just felt like less than. I felt like I was so different than everybody else, that I had this illness that nobody could see. There was something wrong, and I didn't have a name for it, which was really difficult for a long time. And so I had friends trying to help me outside the bathroom door. I was enraged knowing that I couldn't be normal. I was forcing it. It was that much more painful. My body held on to that pain and that forcefulness that I was doing to it. And it just created more of a problem. And so I also had a friend of my mom's who was a therapist who tried literally doing like exposure therapy by getting me a box of tampons, drawing smiley faces on all of them, and like walking me through the process and letting me know it wasn't my fault in the moment, and like, you know, drawing a diagram about how much bigger he was than me, and like really just trying to get my brain and body to understand that it was okay to use tampons, really. That, and it was so much more than that, but that was really my focus at the time as a teenager, trying to utilize tampons. I wasn't in a relationship, so that stuff came much later, which I'll talk about. But nothing was working. So I went through middle school and high school with this piece of my journey that I didn't speak about to anybody, to the level that I know about it now, because I didn't understand it really, and no one was talking about this piece. And as I started to heal by finding my voice, by starting to speak about my own story, this is a piece that I left out. I've been sharing my story publicly since around 2012. And I was standing on stages and doing workshops and speaking at Child Advocacy Center galas, speaking at events to raise money as a survivor speaker. And this is a piece that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole because I still hadn't even faced it myself. And so at 17, when I was in my senior year of high school, the pain became excruciating. It was embarrassing. It was frustrating. I was full of shame because I knew that whatever was going on was linked to my sexual trauma. And senior year was the first time that I was intimate with somebody on my prom night. And we didn't go all the way, but we went far enough for me to know that something was very wrong again. And so beyond the tampons, now it was impacting my relationships. And thankfully, I had a great friend / date at the time. And he actually he said, okay, he stopped and held my hand the rest of the night. And he knew a little bit of my story, but neither of us really knew what was wrong. And so I just knew something was very wrong. And around that time, 17, 18 years old, I ended up going to the gynecologist for the first time because I had gone through so much of my healing journey and started to realize like self-care is non-negotiable. Healing is hard, but worth it. And so I started to face some things, parts of my story, past and beyond the flashbacks had stopped years before. I was able to kind of face different parts. And I went to the gynecologist and I was completely traumatized. I put my feet up on the stirrups and instantly went into a panic attack. And I hadn't had a panic attack in a long time. And my whole body, I could feel the tightness. My entire body tightened. I got palms sweaty, clammy. I started instant tears and I started to freak out, basically. And the gynecologist, she was very nice, but this is what she does every day. And so she kind of just really didn't treat it necessarily. Like she wasn't mean or rude or didn't say anything specific, but she didn't do anything at all. And so I'm really passionate about teaching trauma-informed care to clinicians, to medical professionals, especially in the fields of gynecology and physical therapy, pelvic floor physical therapy, which I'll talk more later about. But, it really does make an impact. I think if she had walked with me maybe and like we took it slow, I mean, I get it. She does this every day. It's just another gynecological exam. So she was like, all right, in and out, like pap smear out. And we weren't even able to get there. I put my feet on the stirrups and started to freak out. And so I ended up leaving that day. They actually had me wait in the waiting room. They kind of held on to my keys because I was not safe to drive. And then I went home and I swore I'd never go back. I'd never take care of my well woman needs. I would never go through routine exams. I would never go back again. And so fast forward. So that was around 2009. So again, my story began around 2002. This is now 2009. I tried to make a step in the direction of taking care of myself in this way, but I really just couldn't face it. And so fast forward to 2016. I'm 25 years old. I'm living on Cape Cod where I live now. I'm working full time in the field. I when I graduated college, I went to school for sociology and criminal justice. I obtained a job when I got out of college in 2013 as a full-time advocate. And so I'd been doing that job for 2 years. I then got another job opportunity here on Cape Cod, was working as an advocate there for some time. I got the job in 2015, so I was there for about a year as a child advocate at a child advocacy center. And I was pursuing becoming a forensic interviewer. And so in 2016, I was 25 years old, and I was in another traumatic event happened. I was in a plane crash, and I dropped that like it's nothing. I know that's kind of shocking for some people. I've healed a lot from that as well. And so I'm not going to get into the details of that, but basically this other traumatic event happens, and I am forced to pay attention to my body in ways I never have been before. And I say forced not in a bad way, but kind of there was no other choice. I had to go for I received months and then 2+ years of medical care for injuries that I sustained. I went through some orthopedic physical therapy, pool physical therapy, a surgical consult to check on injuries from the seatbelt, a bunch of primary care visits, ER trips, and so much healing to do physically. And so I really couldn't deny that there was something in my body, like as I was healing from this crash, that there was something in my body that was left kind of untouched. I called it like uncharted territory. And so I had healed in so many ways from my sexual trauma. And now this like plane crash experience, I had started to heal from kind of the mental, emotional, physical from that. But I knew that there was one more piece of my journey that needed to be healed. And so I got really comfortable with my primary care at the time. She was a PA at my doctor's office, and she did what I wish every doctor would do. And I got the courage one day to talk to her, and I said, there is something else I want to try to heal from. And she then stopped everything she was doing kind of medically, like she was checking me out and stuff. And she sat on her little stool at my level, actually lower than me a little bit, and was like, and put her hand on my leg. And she said, tell me what's going on. And from that point on, we had this beautiful patient-doctor relationship where she walked me through every step, slow and steady, at my pace. She was trauma informed, so she knew that she needed to tell me every step of what she was doing before it happened. I didn't even have to tell her that. But honestly, as a survivor, you have every right to tell providers, you need to walk me through every step of what you're about to do. And that's my encouragement to you today, that if you're terrified to face something physically going on in your body, whether it be linked to trauma or just in general as a survivor, my encouragement to you is tell them, say the thing, because unfortunately we can't expect that every doctor that we see is trauma informed, and it's often the opposite. And so I finally gained the courage to tell somebody that could help me about what was happening in my body, because the only people that I had told at that point was like a friend of my mom's and my friend who went through it, the sexual assault, the same day. And as much as they could try to help, they could only help to a certain extent, and what they were doing to help wasn't working. And so I started to become in tune with my body, healing at its own pace. And I knew it was time to face the impact. And so I'm going to bring up a few slides because this is more of the technical piece of my presentation, where I'm going to walk you through what my diagnosis was, what I went through in the process, and what my body was doing responding to what it had been through. So just give me a second to bring this up. Sorry. Okay, here we go. All right, I'm going to have Stephanie tell me if you can see this presentation part.
All right, looks good.
Okay, awesome. All right, so I am going to just go through these couple slides, and then I'm going to unshare my screen. But basically what my diagnosis was vaginismus. And that year that I started seeing that doctor, that was basically 2019. So 3 years after the plane crash, I had consistently seen her over time for different needs through the plane crash injuries. And then in 2019, at that primary care visit where I told her what was going on, she was an amazing PA that was coordinating my care. And because I had started become so in tune with my body after the plane crash, I knew it was time to face it. And so and again, we had to face it through an exam because she had to know what was going on in my body. She had to actually physically feel what was happening internally for me. And so again, trigger warning on this part, I'm going to be honest. And so what she had to do was, in an attempt to get a pap smear, she had to feel what the muscles inside my body were doing. And so from that, instantly she knew, she started a test with just a Q-tip. So she just tried to insert a Q-tip. And I was like, I'm going to throw up. I felt like I was going to pass out. My body went clammy. And it was more of a physical reaction. And I'll talk more about this with some of the research that goes into it. Has kind of really validated my experience, because for so long I thought that it was mental. Like I thought, like, I'm doing well mentally. Why isn't my body following suit? But it actually was a physical condition that I was going through. And so the year that we worked beyond the plane crash injuries to heal me of this, she started very, very slow by trying to attempt a normal exam. So pelvic exam, pap smear, all those things that most people get routinely. And I never was able to have a successful one. We worked for weeks. I would go into her office once every other week or once a week sometimes to start the steps. So the first time she would just have me sit on the table with my feet in the stirrups, and that would be my whole visit. Then the next time she would have me sit on the table with my feet in the stirrups, and she would put her hands on my thighs. And then the next time she would, it was a progression. And that's trauma informed. And again, she is a doctor, so those offices are like in and out, like under an hour, sometimes under 30 minutes. And she took the time. She didn't care that she was under a time crunch. And I think a lot of medical professionals need to not care under the time crunch, and really, especially with their patients with trauma, especially with their patients with sexual trauma during GYN exams, there needs to be a time allotted for that. There's no other option. And so there was I am a woman of faith, so she would allow me to bring in like worship music to play during these appointments. She would let me listen to a couple songs, and then she would come in and start the exam. And I always was armed with bracelets that said things like "You're courageous" or strength. Like right now I have a couple on. One says "Unleash," "Survivor," "I am one voice." One has a cross on it, and one says "Unbreakable." And so setting the space for your healing is really important. And so she would, I had to do a lot of self-advocating. I had to find my voice in a medical appointment to say, like, I need you to stop. That's too much for today. I need to go home. And so it took a lot of that, which is not easy to do, especially when you're being rushed in a medical setting. But I want to encourage every survivor to do that. And I'm willing to talk to anybody offline about this, on how to do that, on like finding a provider or anything. I'm totally willing to help, because I wish someone had done it for me. I had to do a lot for myself. And so there was a lot of progression in those appointments. And so we both cried when I had tears of joy when I had a successful pap smear, and it was normal. She knew it would probably be normal, but I was able to endure, I will say, the process, because it was excruciatingly painful. And why was that? Why was it excruciatingly painful? Something that is a routine thing for a lot of people. It's because of the diagnosis of vaginismus. I was diagnosed with vaginismus, pelvic pain, pelvic floor dysfunction, and all these things work together for something as simple as using a tampon, for something as impactful as intercourse or being intimate with someone that you love. And so the fears of my childhood after my abuse essentially came true, that something was wrong in my body. But at the same time, I am thankful that I had a provider who was willing to walk with me through that. And so what is vaginismus? Basically, as you can see on the screen, it's an involuntary contraction of the pelvic floor muscles that surround the vagina. It can lead to inability to have penetration because of tightness or pain. And on the right-hand side, you'll see kind of the cycle of pain, just like we see kind of the cycle of abuse, that, different there, everything becomes a cycle. So this is a cycle specifically for this pain. And so a little bit more about that. So your body basically anticipates pain. And then, so your life experience causes your limbic system. It's actually very involved with the limbic system, which I'll read you something shortly about that. And it's a sense of negativity towards possibilities of pain or danger. So it's a anticipation of pain. It's not a confirmed pain. It's really an anticipation. Think about anticipation in general when you're like anticipating a big test or anticipating a conversation with somebody that you're not excited to have. You can feel that in your body, and this is the same thing. Your body starts to create an alarm. Like at step 1, your body starts to say, this is not safe. I don't want to do this. And so step 2 is the involuntary reaction. Again, I was falsely informed about this on my journey that I thought it was something mental. So I was like, I don't understand how my body is not responding with how I feel mentally. Mentally, I feel good. Mentally, I feel a lot of healing. But physically, my body was still in that cycle of pain. And so the limbic alarm causes the body to react incorrectly by tightening the vaginal muscles to protect itself from potential pain or harm from a person or an object or just something normal. The result of that, step 3, is painful sex. And then the pain is reinforced. And then your body braces kind of for impact and creates tightness around the pelvic floor. So your muscles tighten up, and then any type of insertion or anything becomes impossible, like physically impossible. I like to describe it as basically a wall. And oftentimes vaginismus is described as a wall. So anything in contact with that wall, it becomes excruciatingly painful, as you can imagine. So that's a little bit about kind of the cycle of pain. I'm going to stop to see if there's any questions, because I know that was a lot of information.
Yeah, Melanie, we do have somebody in the chat is asking if there's any way we could zoom in on the smaller font in the cycle of pain chart, just so we could see it a little bit better.
Yes, let me see if I can do that. Did that work at all?
Yeah.
Yep, so that's anticipates pain, involuntary reaction, painful sex, or painful insertion. I'll include tampons in there or whatever else. Pain is reinforced, bracing for impact, and avoidance completely of intimacy or lack of desire can even at the cell level develop. So I'll give you a minute to kind of read through that if you would like. And so some of the contributing factors, I'm speaking about my own experience about trauma, but really this can happen from, I hear a lot of stories. I started an Instagram page, which I'll share with you at the end, sharing my journey over the years of treatment that I went through. I did a post at every treatment that I went to share my experience, but I learned through that community. There is a whole community of people that have gone through this and are sharing their stories. There's a whole bunch of providers, pelvic floor physical therapists, which I'll talk more about later, who share honestly that, sometimes even religious trauma can actually make your body go through this process as well. And as a woman who does have a pretty strong faith and I believe in Jesus, I am a woman of faith. That breaks my heart because I know the messages that are taught, purity culture, things like that. And it can create so much shame and bring your body through the same experience that a survivor of sexual trauma can go through. So I just want to validate anybody that has had that experience, that it doesn't always have to be directly from the trauma itself. It could be what you were told growing up and then your body responds to that. So there are many other, or there's women on there that have had successful intimate relationships with their spouses, and then all of a sudden they have a baby and then their body goes through this process. So there are many different experiences of people going through this, but my experience is directly related to trauma.
And we did have somebody ask if you could define religious trauma.
Sure. I think, again, I haven't personally experienced religious trauma, but I've heard a lot of people who have. And I would say, growing up in maybe a Christian environment or some type of religion, and then being told false teachings about purity culture, about there's a lot of shame regarding sex in a lot of religions. And I think that would be my best definition. So shame in regards to intimate relationships, sex, any of those things taught in a religious institution and not taught from truth, really. That, everybody has their own experience and their own body, and people need to be empowered rather than disempowered in those institutions. I hope that answered the question, but
There's a little delay, but I think so.
Okay. So I'm zooming out on that just because I am going to go into the next slide that I have to talk more about, and let me know if I need to zoom in on this one as well. It looks good on my end, but I don't want anyone to not be able to see it. So what causes vaginismus? And this one, again, similar to the cycle of pain, this is an involuntary reaction. And this is a great resource, pelvichealing.com, for more information about all kinds of resources that there are out there and what different conditions can be under pelvic pain, and pretty much anything under the sun that you could be wondering about. They have great information on there. And so basically, so I've talked a little bit about kind of the cycle of pain and the results. And the person has not caused this pain. The body is reacting. And so I think that's kind of a misconception that, like, you're not mentally, I was told by doctors early on, I didn't talk much about this part, but I was told by a couple doctors, like, just have a glass of wine before you try to put a tampon in. Just try to relax. And unfortunately, I've heard that story repeated over and over again through being in the community of women that have faced pelvic pain and vaginismus. And, it's not something that we can control. It's the body's response to whatever the thing may be. And so it can be frustrating because it's kind of like a invisible illness. So I hear people talk, and, with some of these conditions like endometriosis, or I'm just naming a few that I've heard about, where, like, you can't see it. So it's not like a broken arm where you can see what's going on. Like, oh, that person, oh, they must have fallen, I hope they heal quickly. Like, you can't see this. And so it can become a very isolating and painful process, because how do you explain this to somebody of what you're going through with this? And I did find that to be a very isolating fact of my journey, that until I started to share my own journey on Instagram and connect with people who've been through this, connect with providers, connect with people, and started to become educated and inspired and empowered on my own journey, to then be able to share this with others, because those people that have shared before me helped me. And so I want to be able to do that for other people. And so really the trauma leads to, and the cycle of pain leads to, a complex body memory of the trauma, of the pain. It's not an emotional response, it's a physical. It can come with an emotional response, but it's really, it is really linked to your body is just responding. Even if in your mind you're like, I'm okay, like, I want to use the tampon, I want to be intimate with this person, like, your body will not allow you to. And I spent many times, on the table getting nauseous and really going through kind of really difficult pieces of this journey. I had what's called a vasovagal experience. So it's got many terms, but it's a vasovagal response where your blood pressure skyrockets and then drops. And so, I'm going to switch the slides as well, just so you can have another image of kind of what this means. And so basically my blood pressure skyrocketed and dropped within like seconds during these appointments when we were trying to achieve an exam. And I really, like, it's hard to explain to people because people are like, just do it, and so what the treatment ended up being was pelvic floor physical therapy. I love this image of the land of pelvic pain because it is so true. There are so many things that, like, There's, the sharp and stabbing snow belt, which is the pain that you feel when attempting to do any of these things. There's just mountains of different types of pain, physically, emotionally. And then the nausea north and the nap land. I had so much nausea during the process. It was exhausting. The well-intentioned and unsolicited advice whirlpool. That's like the doctors that said, just have a glass of wine and relax while you're trying to do it. And the Bay of Burning, all kinds of stuff. Fatigue-filled forest, caves of constant cramping. After my treatments, which I'll talk about a little bit in a minute, of pelvic floor physical therapy, I would have I would feel like I was on an internal merry-go-round that I couldn't get off physically. And I will say now it was worth it, but in the midst, it was really, really hard. It was basically like I was on nausea medication, a similar nausea medication that they give to cancer patients when they're going through treatment. And so this is a very real thing. And the thing that was used to heal me was pelvic floor physical therapy. And so, but during pelvic floor PT, what it is kind of beyond trying to get the exam, is seeing a pelvic floor physical therapist who specializes in pelvic pain, vaginismus, and many other conditions that are involved with the pelvic area. And basically my primary care referred me to a pelvic floor physical therapist. And basically what it was, for a while, it was 2 times a week. She kind of made me a treatment plan. It's different for everybody. But for 2 times a week, she would do what was called myofascial release. So the goal of pelvic PT, in my case, was to reteach my body that penetration was not a threat. And so any type. So like I said, I couldn't even insert a Q-tip. And so that, again, wasn't a threatening circumstance, but it was traumatic. My body wasn't reading that as a safe thing. And so basically, my body tightened. And I often describe it as kind of the jaws of life and the wall. So if you can picture like jaws of life, it's like clamped shut. There is no, you can't get through it. And that caused a lot of pain. And so being able to get this treatment, again, at first it was very painful. It was very vulnerable, still is. Like when I described this, I was on a podcast, the One Voice podcast, which I think is, I had posted it on the Survivor Space page, and I think it's going to end up on the website as well, which is an amazing resource just for any type of conversation. But I remember even the hosts of the conversation, both survivors, they had never heard of this, but they were saying they could have benefited from this before they had their kids, after they had their kids, throughout their healing journey. And so it's a hard step to take. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But it is an important one if this is something you face, if you are faced with any type of pelvic dysfunction, pelvic pain, difficulty in any of these areas that I've talked about. And basically it's myofascial release, and you can look it up. Unfortunately, it is and again, this is a trigger warning, it is the type of treatment that Larry Nassar said he was using on all the amazing women that he had used. And so when that case came out, it was kind of traumatic for me, because something that healed me so much was used to manipulate and abuse other people. But I will say, kind of on the positive side of things, that myofascial release done the right way, my pelvic floor physical therapist, this is what she does every day. She's trauma informed. She's incredible. If you live in Massachusetts, let me know, and I will connect you with her. She is amazing. And even New Hampshire, Maine, New England people, she's worth the trip. She is trauma informed. She was similar to my doctor. She walked me through every single step. And it was just really, it was excruciating, but worth it. And so my body started to come into this place of healing, physical healing. It had some to do with the emotional piece of me walking through, as this treatment was happening, the emotional things that were coming up for me, but more so letting my body relax into kind of its baseline. And so the myofascial release uses internal, basically massage, I guess is the best word that I can use, medical massage to release muscles that may be tight internally, to get your body used to kind of penetration in a medical setting. Some people use vaginal dilators, which is a at-home treatment that you can do in conjunction with pelvic PT. I did both, and I started with the dilators in the office because I was terrified to do them at home by myself, because it is a very intimate thing, even with my own body. I had been so disconnected from my body for years that I really had a hard time like doing this. And so she walked me through it. A great resource for those types of things is Intimate Rose is the title of the page. And I share that on my Instagram as well. She has like kind of non-threatening vaginal dilator. She has a whole guide and a video and just very supportive, encouraging content on her website and on her Instagram as well. But so we went through this treatment for about 2 years. That was from 2019 to 2020, and a little bit after that. And so I progressed leaps and bounds on my journey. I started to feel connected to my body again in ways I never thought I needed to be, in ways that I never thought would happen. I was successfully able to wear a tampon. Again, that's not where my worth lies, but that was a very, excuse me, that was a very big thing for me because I wanted to feel normal. And so I'm going to just go back to talking to you for a moment. Let me just share my screen. All right. And so, really being able to walk through this treatment twice a week for over a year. And then in the process of that, I got into a relationship, and that was in around the exact year that I started my treatment. So I started my treatment in 2019, and I got into a relationship in 2019. And my now husband, so the relationship actually ended up being amazing part of this healing for me. Again, one of my biggest fears through all of this was that no one would want to love me. No one would want to be with me physically otherwise, because it wasn't possible. I knew that like if I couldn't, successfully have penetration, I wouldn't be able to have kids. And who wants to marry someone, and these are the lies that started to plant in my head, that nobody's going to want to love me. I'm never going to be able to love and be loved. And through this process, those pieces started to come back to me. And that trauma was replaced with possibility. That impossibility was replaced with possibility. And it was an emotional journey. It was highs and lows, peaks and valleys. But I thankfully was in the hands of a great provider. I had been seeing a specialist in Boston as well, trying to get those yearly exams in a more consistent way. And I saw the chief of gynecology there. Again, if you live in Massachusetts, let me know. I'll connect you to her. I connected to an amazing patient advocate there in Boston. Same thing, I can connect you to her as well. And so this treatment went on for about a year and a half, 2 years. And then my now husband and I, we waited until marriage to have sex. So we were dating, and we had done other things, and I had success in other ways. But this was the big question. Like, did this treatment actually heal me from the inside out? And I'm happy to say that the answer is yes. And I was able to love and be loved. I got married in 2020. I got engaged in 2021, got married in 2022, the most beautiful wedding day. And I often grieve the time I lost being in this pain for over 15 years. But I also know that the healing came in just the right time. I am so glad. I remember I used to pray that God would heal me before he put a guy in my life, because I wanted to be healed and, to be able to do whatever, have a healthy, intimate relationship before we met. And it actually happened that he was brought into my life in the midst, which I'm so glad now looking back that was the case, because he was able to walk through it with me, the highs and lows, the peaks and valleys. He was able to see it in real time and to hold my hand during hard treatments. He came in at the end of my treatments and was able to really see what I was going through and like how he could help, and how he could help, if you know what I mean, in the future, if we needed it. And I am happy to report that. So, like I said, we waited till marriage. So this was like the final piece to see if the treatment had worked in that way. And we actually got pregnant on our wedding night. And so my daughter is, I'm actually going to share my screen again because I have a little photo. Just give me a second. All right. Okay, so my daughter, that's Bria. My daughter is going to be 3 months old tomorrow, and I'm just starting to wrap up a little bit of my journey. But this is the result, the miracle of doing the hard thing, of facing this pain that I swore I would take to the grave with me, honestly, because it felt like a huge mountain. And I want to validate any survivor that feels like this is a huge mountain. It is, I will not sugarcoat it for you. It is a hard journey. It is hard to face it, but it is worth it. And I'm here for you. I've walked through this. And so I want every survivor to know that you don't have to do this alone. And I have a lot of resources, pages that are helpful, that were helpful to me. My Instagram page is right there on the screen. My Facebook name is on the screen. I'm here to help any person wanting to walk through this, wanting to face this, even with just some resources. Or if you're local to Massachusetts, honestly, I'll meet you at your appointment, because I had people that along the way stepped alongside me in this, and it was invaluable to really take something out of the deepest, darkest pit and to bring it into this beautiful light and to let people walk alongside. And it's an honor. If someone asks you to walk alongside them, it's an honor. And we shouldn't take that lightly either. But as a survivor, it's courageous to ask for help. And I wouldn't be where I am living all the things I prayed for in the deepest, darkest pain, if I didn't take the hard step. So my encouragement to you today is to take the hard step. You're worth it. Your healing's worth it. You're not alone. This is not the end of your story. Your story doesn't end with an unsaid pain. And there is so much more on the horizon and through the hard parts. And I, at the time, didn't think I'd get through it. Like, some of those days were really, really tough when I was having to do some treatment at home. Wasn't motivated. It was exhausting. It was intimate because I had to like close the door and go behind closed doors to do it, obviously, because it's such an intimate thing. The in-person appointments were sometimes excruciating. I had to be really real. Other times I wasn't, and I paid for it later. And it just was like peaks and valleys is the biggest way that I can describe it. And so I just really want other survivors to know that there is help out there for something like this, for the physical ramifications of trauma. And definitely, even if you're not ready yet, even if it's like, save this information and down the road, whenever you're ready, everyone's pace is different. So don't take my journey of like, oh, by the time I'm in a relationship, I have to face this. Like, everyone's journey is different. Healing is not linear. Healing is not the same for every survivor, but I just want you to know that you're not alone, and there are people out there that can help you and walk you through it. So I can put this back up. I'm just going to stop sharing it for a moment, just to kind of come back on the screen myself. Oops. So, okay. So I am back, and I just wanted to leave a few minutes at the end for any questions that come in or any additional conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Melanie. Well, looks like we do have a couple questions. One person is asking, is there anything that you recommend, like Kegels or something similar for reclaiming your body and strengthening the pelvic floor?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. So there is some like at home things that you can do. A lot of the pelvic floor strengthening is like really from your core. So any core workouts, actually. So I got married, kind of stopped treatment, all that. But then after having a baby, I was like, I think I might need to be seen again, because things were like feeling really weak. And I was really strong going into my marriage, and like feeling really strong. And I could tell when my pelvic floor was like weakening, and I could tell when I was tightening. And I did some internal biofeedback, which they do sometimes during pelvic PT. I think you have to do it in really a controlled setting. But basically, an average person's pelvic floor is at a certain number, and mine was way over the top. And so I was constantly in a state of tightness. And some people have the opposite problem where they're constantly in a state of weakness. And so my pelvic floor physical therapist did an assessment, kind of an internal assessment, just a couple weeks ago after my 6-week postpartum appointment. And she said, yeah, I see what you're saying. Like and the fact that I was even able to read that on my own body was crazy. But I was able to, she got me on like a core program at home, which I'm willing to share with whoever asked the question. It's literally you get like a medicine ball and a band and you're good to do it at home. And that has really helped me like re-strengthen my pelvic floor. And there's definitely a lot of resources out there to strengthen, but it's mostly core work. So if you find like a core program, if you're involved with the gym, focus on the core program, kind of like the resistance with your knees, or the I forget what the machine's called, where you press in and then press out. That's a huge one. And you're able to do that at home with a band as well. So you don't have to go to a gym. But I'm willing to connect with whoever it is that might want to. I could take a picture of my core program that she gave me recently. And if you need connection to a pelvic floor PT as well to get some internal anything, I can connect as well. What was the first part of that question? I think I skipped that part.
Is there anything you recommend, like Kegels, for reclaiming your body and strengthening your pelvic
floor?
floor?
So there's mixed reviews on the Kegel thing. Honestly, sometimes it's really hard to do correctly, is basically what I've been told. And so a lot of people think they're doing it and they're strengthening their pelvic floor, and they're actually doing more damage than good. So just be very careful. Just doing Kegels kind of thing. Really either speak to a pelvic floor physical therapist or get some more information about what program, because your body may not be one that actually needs Kegels. It needs something else. So just I would make more of an educated decision rather than just going for that option. So I think that's a misconception, because I thought that too. I was like, I asked my pelvic PT, I'm like, so we're just going to be doing Kegels in here? And she's like, actually, we're not doing any of those. I'm like, oh, okay. So it's a misconception. I think it's the easy answer, but I think that it's so much more complicated than that.
Yeah, definitely. And then our last question is, did you also regain more memories that helped your healing? And this was towards the end of your presentation. I'm not exactly sure what she's referring to. But.
Yes. So I think my guess is the repressed memories that I had from what happened when I was 12. I mean, from before I was 12. How did that inform kind of the healing? And I never got the full picture of what happened. Like I went back to a therapist, because I had not been seeing a therapist at the time, because I was doing really well when the memories resurfaced. And I was working in the field already, and it had passed my old neighborhood, and that's what kind of brought it up. I was actually on the way to court to help a client, and I had this like body memory driving by a neighborhood where I was babysat in. So I did go through with a therapist. I went through EMDR, which a lot of people are familiar with, or maybe not. I went through EMDR and was able to get as much as I could. But I came to a point in that journey, that EMDR journey, for a couple of years of on and off getting EMDR for these specific memories, that I really didn't need to know anymore to heal. There was, things that, yes, I could validate that it happened, no matter if the memories came at the time or later on, that part of my story was valid, even though I was speaking on stages and I had never shared that piece, because I didn't have those memories prior to that year working in the field and driving by. And so I felt this like disconnect from my whole story. Like, is my story even valid anymore? Because I didn't remember this part. And I battled with that. But what I did find is that, again, everybody, like some people would need to know all the details to move forward and to heal. For me, it came to a point where I went back to like my elementary school guidance counselor to ask her if she remembers anything from that time about my demeanor, about and she gave me a few key pieces of information about how every time before I would go on the bus, because they would be notified when I was not going home, if I was going to this babysitter's house, she said you would like linger in my doorway at the end of the day, and like you would just like stand there. And like now I'm looking back and I think it was the days that you were going there. And so it was like I was standing there quiet, wanting someone to say, what are you doing? Like, you going outside to catch the bus to their house? And then different things like a phone call that my mom had with the babysitter at the time, where she asked if I was close to my uncles or cousins because I was clinging to her husband when he would come home from work at the babysitter's house. So those were some of the key memories that I was able to be like, okay, something happened. I don't know how many times it happened over the year or two that they were babysitting me. I'll never know that information. The babysitter has since passed away, so she may or may not hold information that I may never get. But there came a point in my healing where it was like I was sick of being on the hamster wheel of trying to figure this out, and I just had to let it go. And there were definitely times where I wondered, but I had to kind of move forward somehow. And so there was a lot involved in that healing, but yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Melanie, for being here, for taking the time to share your story. I know some of these topics are not easy to discuss and relive. Just as a reminder to everybody that's watching, we'll have this recording on our website. So if you want to watch it again, you want to go back and hear different sections, you're welcome to. And then also I'm putting in the chat right now a feedback survey. So if anybody would like to fill that in for us, that helps us a lot. Thank you, everyone who is joining us. And we'll go ahead and leave the chat open for the next couple of hours. So if anybody watching thinks of a question, feel free to come back and we will relay those questions to Melanie.
Yep. And you can reach out to me if you happen to take a picture of I did leave contact info at my last slide. So if you're watching this later, you can go back and find that slide. Feel free to screenshot that and reach out to me directly if you have any questions. I know sometimes it's hard to put in a general chat, but if you want to reach out to me directly, you can absolutely do that via email or my Instagram page.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Melanie. And
you're very welcome.
We'll go ahead and end the stream now. Thanks, everybody.